So you went out to LA and you stayed for quite some time, and you played with just a whole bunch of, the who's who of kind of the roots rock, blues tinged, the coterie of the greats, if you will. So what kind of went from there? So you played with Bobby, and for those who aren't familiar, Bobby Whitlock, of course, was in Derek and the Dominoes. Yes. And was also in Delaney and Bonnie and Friends, and was on that first Clapton solo record and all that kind of stuff. So after you're playing with Bobby Whitlock and doing stuff, and where does it lead from there?
Well, it's interesting. My wife and I were just talking about this the other night. It was the fact that Los Angeles, at that particular point in history, was the center of the universe for all major recording.
Right.
So everybody, if they didn't live there, they came there to record and to record with various musicians. So there was an abundance of work, even for a newcomer like me. I got a lot of trickle-down work and met through networking of all these people I was meeting, the level of or caliber of people that I had an opportunity to work with it would take me places I never dreamed that I could venture into. It was just by nature of the fact that it was a good place to be if you were pretty good on your instrument and meeting people, which I was. I think that was the gist of it. So from there, I worked. I worked with Leon Russell, Bonnie Raitt, Maria Muldaur. I did a lot of gigs, like crazy things, like shows with the great DJ Wolfman Jack that allowed me to work with old groups, and I worked with Little Richard. Did I mention him? And the next great gig that I got was a call from Larry Taylor, who told me that he was working with John Mayall, and John Mayall was looking for a new guitar player and wanted me to go up there with him. So I did, up to John's infamous house in Laurel Canyon, and jammed there, won a couple songs with John Mayall, and he said, "Okay, you're in."
And that was that.
That was a real milestone career gig, because of all the guys who I admired, like Clapton and Peter Green and Mick Taylor and others that had followed who worked with John Mayall. That was the gig to have as a guitar player.
Right. A rite of passage to the greats, for the greats.
Yeah. So 2 weeks later, we're in the studio, took time off for Christmas and New Year's, and then went on tour with Mayall in Europe in late January, I believe. So that's how quickly he did things.
Sure.
We did it in 4 or 5 days. And he was out in the marketplace in January or February.
So when you were out in LA, how much did you front your own band, or were you pretty much centered in on being a supportive person and being more of a sideman type of a situation, or were you also peppering your other stuff with doing your own thing, fronting your own band?
First of all, the kind of gigs that I was getting, and some of them might have been sideman gigs, but most of them were creative enough, and you were made
a member,
sort of more of a member of a band. So it didn't really feel like. I mean, I've done sideman gigs, no question about it, here and there. But to answer your question, I believe I started doing gigs on my own about 1974. So that was 2 or 3 years after arriving there. And there were enough clubs around the area that I could do that in. But the fact of the matter was, is a lot of the gigs I was getting were taking me on the road. Like with John Mayall, I was on the road for the better part of a year. And so, and then you'd get back to town, you'd kind of try to make everybody aware you were back in town, do some solo work, try to get some more session work. And at the end of the year, for a guy in his early 20s, the bottom line would amount to a year's worth of work. So sure. That's how that came about. So all the time recording solo work, you know.
I'm sorry, I was just going to ask you about the what kind of gear were you using back then? I mean, was it already one of those things where it was like a given that kind of I know it probably was, but it's like, okay, we got Les Pauls, we got Strats, we got Tellys, we got 335s, but what was your chosen voice at that point in time? And were you mostly doing slide back then, or was it just kind of an equal amount of conventional playing and slide playing and that kind of stuff?
At that point in time, I was probably doing 75% conventional and 25% slide. You know? Okay. And at that time, I didn't have a designated slide guitar at that point in time. At that point, I was playing in standard tuning, so I would just pick up a slide. But also, I was a dyed-in-the-wool Telly man. I had Tellys that would make your mouth water today. But then you could buy. I bought a 52, 53 broadcaster Nolecasters for under $500, guys. That's what things were going for then. I had them from every year. You know, I had a closet. It was my Telly closet, Blackguard City, and Fender amps. You know, I had a wonderful Super Reverb that had extra mid-range in it. Just made that Telly, whatever Telly I was using, sound like $1 million.
Excellent.
And I later got a Gibson little melody maker that had a humbucker in it.
Okay.
It was the best sounding humbucker I have ever owned. I don't know why I ever got rid of it. And I set that up for slide and started playing more, and with E tuning or A tuning or whatever later.
So when you're slide playing, like when you first went out to LA, who were your major influences, and how would you say how you had progressed up to that point as far as your slide playing today, which is majestic beyond compared? Where were you at that point in time, and how much did you develop after you'd been there? You know what I mean?
Yes, yeah. Like you, probably my first Telly hero was James Burton. We got to see him on television every week on The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet back in the 50s and early 60s. So, and my first, I was never much for learning to read music. I couldn't do it, but I did have a teacher for a short while who realized that I was abysmal at reading, but showed me how to bend strings. And he was a James Burton fan, and kind of alerted me to certain solos and how to kind of progress from that point. So it would have been James Burton as a Telly guy, and a local guy that I never got to see, but heard by standing outside of a club a couple times, was Roy Buchanan.
Aha.
He was in the Philadelphia area and had a couple of local records out that were just local. I wouldn't even call them hits, but musicians knew about them in the area, and you'd always hear his name. If you went up on stage and bent your strings, some other older guitar player might say, "Oh, you play in that Roy Buchanan style." I said, "Oh yeah, I guess so." So I stood outside of a club in Wildwood, New Jersey when I was 16 or 17, and he was doing a gig for a short time with a band called the Monkey Men. His claim to fame was they had a live monkey on stage with them. But I listened to this string bending, just like, whoa, listen to that, kind of thing. So yeah, it was amazing. So, and then Jesse Ed Davis was one of the first slide guys. Him and Brian Jones were the first slide that I heard, and he was a big influence as a Telly guy. And on those, the original Delaney and Bonnie and Friends record, there was a guy called Jerry McGee, who became a good friend, as did James and Jesse Ed Davis. He was playing a Telly, great Telly guy, another Louisiana guy. So I'd say they were my main Telly influences at that point in time.
So when you got on, how did Ry Cooder kind of, I mean, I think you told kind of a funny story about being in the studio and hearing someone play slide down the way, and you going in going, hey, that sounds pretty good, and you realize, oh, it's Ry.
Yeah, that came much later. I had met Rise on the set of Crossroads, the movie that he.
Oh yeah.
I had a friend, John Duke Logan, who played the harmonica on that soundtrack, and he invited me to come with him one day and met him there.